Welcome to episode 3 of our Building Green series, where we use eco-friendly guidelines to do amazing Minecraft builds. And today we're going to focus on a type of house called the berm house. Now, if you're not familiar with the berm house, it is basically where the ground comes right up to the bottom of the windows. In other words, imagine a house that is sunken into the ground a little ways. I have been fortunate enough to live in a berm house once, and I can tell you it is quite a novelty to be sitting there at your desk, turn, look out the window, and be basically nose to nose with a bunny. But before we can bust out building, I have to mention one little thing. We might have an overabundance of these guys. Unbeknownst to me, while yours truly was busy working, these guys were multiplying. The problem came from this little composter right here, and this little waterfall, and this little hole. Yep, you guessed it. These guys were pathfinding to a job they needed, and the waterfall was carrying them into the dark abyss. Fortunately for these guys, they don't sink, so they just kind of piled up. But our numbers went from the 11 original to 29. Now, you guys know how I feel about villagers. They're not NPCs, they're valuable. So this is not a problem. It's a variable, but it's one that's definitely going to have an impact on our builds. So with that in mind, what do you say we get started? All right, so we've barely gotten started, but I wanted to take a minute and show you something important. Moisture can travel through solid concrete, and seeing that this is actually below the water line, we are going to put in a hypothetical crawl space. It really has no value other than me knowing it's there, but if we were going to compare this to an IRL situation, you definitely have to have it. Now, I know there are plenty of houses out there that are built on a slab. In other words, poured concrete directly on top of the ground. And this can work in some situations, but remember, if that moisture comes up through the concrete and ends up soaking your carpet pad, you run the risk of mold. And that is not something that you nor your children want to be exposed to. So keep that in mind, especially if you're building something IRL. And if you have any questions, talk to an experienced builder. We're building a roof. Hey, you guys want a fun fact? The legendary Johnny Appleseed, you know, the guy from the Kids' Tales, was actually a guy by the name of John Chapman. He was a real person who went around planting a whole bunch of apple trees. Now, there was some government incentives to do this, but the point is he didn't plant these delicious things. The kind he planted were actually not fun to eat, but they were really good at making hard cider. Now, I know what you're asking yourself. Was Johnny Appleseed a raging alcoholic? Well, no. By all accounts, he was a fairly religious person. But dysentery was no laughing matter, especially in those days. It was actually safer to drink the slightly fermented cider than it was to drink water. You have to understand, education at that time was fairly stunted. They just didn't have the awareness of what bacteria was or the methods that could be used to ensure clean, healthy water. But we do. Just made a video on it. How's that for a shameless plug? Alrighty, the place is done. You guys ready for a tour? So starting around here at the front, you'll notice we've got some nice shade from the trees. That kind of helps out with heating in the mornings. And we've got our berm banks right up here against the house. If I was to describe this view in a single word, it would be subtle. It's not about screaming for attention nearly as much as it is about comfort and livability. Coming back around to the front door, we have an empty foyer. Isn't that exciting? You've got to remember, I've got almost 30 villagers out here who are in desperate need of shelter. So I went into this thinking about how can I do this quickly and efficiently. And one of the things that I came up with was to share a roof. So in essence, what we have is two small houses that share a common entryway. And those two houses look like this. It's not over the top, but it's fairly comfortable. It's got a nice little couch, a bookshelf, some decorations. We've got a nice little breakfast nook over here. You've got some stove and some storage space for food or whatever. And then we got a couple of coat hooks to hang your stuff on. Oh yeah, and it's got a really tall ceiling. Tall ceilings are one of those things that I have found makes a small footprint feel so much bigger. And then we have a matching one over here. Dun, 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 dun. Generally, I'm not a fan of repetitive building, but we are keeping true to the idea of getting these guys out of the open as quickly as possible. Now, while these may be cozy in a minimalist sort of way, we can't overlook the fact that these are berm housing. So just how much of a benefit is all this earth building stuff? Well, let me show you. Current temperature outside shows a wonderful 93 degrees with a real feel of 106. Ugh. By way of comparison, in my non-climate controlled basement, the temperature is 66 degrees. Yes, you read that right, folks. That is a 40-degree swing. So, yeah, using the earth can make a huge impact on your heating and cooling. For the record, we've been living with off-grid power for a little over 8 years now, and I can tell you with confidence that we will use in the neighborhood of between 2 to 3 times the amount of energy in the summertime than we do in the winter. Had I known then, when we built this house, what I know now, that number would be much different. You see, we build houses based largely on size and appearance and not on how well they treat us. If we were to switch those around, imagine the difference it would make not only on the environment, but on our wallets. So keep that in mind the next time you're looking for a place to call home. Thanks so much for sharing your time with me. As you might imagine, living off-grid quite often gives you a different perspective from what the experts are saying. LED bulbs are fantastic, and I have one in pretty much every socket in the house, but that pales in comparison to natural cooling and not having to use an air conditioner. If you found value in this, then please consider giving me a thumbs up. But better yet, share this with somebody who is passionate about the environment. The only thing we really need to make a difference is imagination and the tenacity to ignore the naysayers. Thanks for watching, everybody.